Daf Yomi, Tractate Avodah Zarah, page 70. Daf Ayin, starting at the bottom of 69b, slightly what you might call mature content, so viewer discretion advised. Amrave Zoy Negoye V'Yisrael Mesubmetz Lo Chamoshoi Nihidi Takiv Lehu Yotza De'avero. Rava says, in the case of a Gentile substitute, by substitute, I mean prostitute. Rava says, in the case of a non-Yehudi prostitute, where Yehudim are dining at her table, the wine at the table is permitted, granted their passion for the sin of harlotry overwhelms their judgment. Now continuing on to 70a, top of the page. Zarah diyayin nesach lo takiv lehu zoyna Yisraelis v'goyim mesubin chamros u'maytam ahoy v'zira layu betayu gerera. But the passion for wine used for a libation does not overwhelm their judgment, and they will not allow her to use it for a libation. In the case of a Yehudi prostitute, and non-Yehudim are dining with her, the wine is forbidden. What is the reason? It is that since she is contemptible in their eyes, she is subjugated to them. And they use the wine for a libation without consideration for her. Hahu beita dehavyativ bechalra d'Yisrael al goyach da dedasha b'yapeh v'have b'zya b'dasha ishar goy dikoi b'ni didane amarav kol derade b'zya shore. The Gemara relates, there was an incident involving a certain house where Yehudim's wine was stored. A non-Yehudi entered the house, and he locked the door before the Yehudi. But there was a crack in the door, and the non-Yehudi was found standing between the barrels. Rava said, all the barrels that were opposite the crack, through which the non-Yehudi could be seen, are permitted, because he would have been wary about being seen tampering with them. Barrels on this side and that side of the crack, where the non-Yehudi could not be seen, are forbidden, as perhaps the non-Yehudi used them for a libation. Hahu chamra d'Yisrael dehavyativ bebeita dehavyar Yisrael b'yayin v'goy b'chayna shemakantin on avki kadamata goyachta lidashe v'yapeh amarave chamra shari meimar amar ki hechik dikadam atay ana kadim ve'atay Yisrael v'yatev b'elyona v'kacha ze li. The Gemara relates there was an incident involving a certain Yehudi's wine that was stored in the lower story of a house in which the Yehudi was living in the upper story, and a non-Yehudi was in the lower story. And the wine could be supervised from the upper story. One day, the residents heard a sound of quarreling and went outside. The non-Yehudi came back first and locked the door before the Yehudi. Rava said the wine is permitted because the non-Yehudi presumably said to himself, just as I came back in early, perhaps my neighbor, the Yehudi, came back in early and is sitting at the upper story and watching me, and therefore he would not use the wine for a libation. Hahu ishpiza dehavyativ bechalra d'Yisrael ishtekach goy dehavyativ be'daneim Amar Rava, im nitbas alav kaganav share ve'im lo asir. The Gemara relates there was an incident involving a certain inn where a Yehudi's wine was stored and a non-Yehudi was found sitting among the barrels. Rava said if he was caught as a thief, meaning if the non-Yehudi seemed startled and did not have a good explanation for being there, the wine is permitted, as the non-Yehudi was presumably afraid about being caught and would not have used it for libation. But if not, the wine is forbidden. Okay. Ay, 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 ay. Yay, 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 yay. Yay, 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 yay. Ahu beite da have yativ bechamra ishtakach goy tarakaim bedina dane. Amravit leilish temote chamra sir. Ilacham rashay metin al pundak. O shavallo shmo asu. My love, afal gav delet le lishtemoteh la bidiit le lishtemoteh. The Gemara relates there was an incident involving a certain house where wine was stored. A non-Yehudi was found standing among the barrels. Rava said if he has a way to excuse his entrance to where the wine was stored, the wine is forbidden. But if not, the wine is permitted. The Gemara raises an objection to this ruling from a Braita. If an inn was locked and a non-Yehudi was inside, or if the Yehudi said to the non-Yehudi, safeguard my wine, the wine is forbidden. What, is it not forbidden even if the non-Yehudi does not have a way to excuse his entrance? The Gemara answers no. The Braita is referring to a situation where he does have a way to excuse his entrance, otherwise the wine is permitted. Hahu Yisrael begoy dehavyatvi Vikashatu chamra shema Yisrael Kal tzoloe beknishta Kam be'azal amerov v'chamer ashrim Imar amar hashtem v'decham lechamre v'hadar ate. The Gemara relates there was an incident involving a certain Yehudi and a certain non-Yehudi who were sitting and drinking wine. The Yehudi heard the sound of praying at the synagogue. He got up and went to pray. Rava said the wine is permitted because the non-Yehudi presumably said to himself, any moment now, he will remember his wine and come back. Ahu Yisrael v'goy de'avyati v'abba Shema Yisrael v'kash v'pred v'shimshe Nafak v'yazam Amarav v'chamr shari v'maramam Hashtem v'chale v'chamr v'halate. The Gemara relates there was an incident involving a certain Yehudi and a certain non-Yehudi who were sitting on a ship. The Yehudi heard the sound of the shofar of twilight, indicating the beginning of Shabbat. He disembarked and went into town to spend Shabbat there. Rava said the wine is permitted because the non-Yehudi presumably said to himself, any moment now, he will remember his wine and come back. The Mishum Shabda Amar Li Asu Giora Ki Avinan Ba Leutan Amrina Yehudai Lo Menatre Shabta Di Menatre Shabta Kama Kis'e Ka Mishtachchi Bishuka. ולא ידע לסביר לה כרב יצחק. אבל יצחק המוציא כיס בשבת מוליכו פחות מ4 אמות. The Gemara comments, and if one might object that the non-Yehudi is presumably not concerned because he knows that the Yehudi will not return until the end of Shabbat, didn't Rava say, Isur the convert told me, when we were still non-Yehudis, before converting, we used to say, Yehudis do not actually observe the Shabbat. as if they observed the Shabbat, how many wallets would be found in the marketplace that the Yehudis could not take on Shabbat? I don't get his question. Okay, and I did not know that we maintain that the halacha is in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Yitzchak. As Rabbi Yitzchak says, one who finds a wallet on Shabbat may carry it in increments of less than 4 cubits. How many people lose their wallets? I mean, the marketplace is full of it. Lost wallets? I don't think so. I'm not sure what he's asking. Evidently, non-Yehudis assume that a Yehudi would violate Shabbat for monetary gain. Okay. Hahu Arya de Havikanim Bimatzalta Shema Goy Shabene Dene Amara Hamra Shari Bimarama Kiechat de Tashena Ana Itisha Nami Israel Akharai Bikochazani. The Gemara relates there was an incident involving a certain lion who roared in the wine press. A non-Yehudi heard the roar and was frightened, and he hid among the barrels of wine. Rava said the wine is permitted because the non-Yehudi presumably said to himself, just as I am hiding a Yehudi, I also be hiding behind me and see me. Okay. Hanehugan Navid Sagi Lepumenita Ubtahu Khayavata Khaviata Duva Amarave Khamura Shari My Taima Ruagan of Israel Hava Avodah Binarda the Amar Shmuel Chama Shari. The Gemara relates there was an incident involving certain thieves who came to Pumadita and opened many barrels of wine. Rava said the wine is permitted. What is the reason? Most of the thieves in Pumadita are Yehudim, and the halacha follows the majority, and therefore the wine is not rendered forbidden. There was a similar incident in Narda, and Shmuel said the wine is permitted. Keman Rabbi Eliezer the Amar Safek Biyato. The Gemara asks, in accordance with whose opinion is this? Perhaps it is in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Eliezer, who says that with regard to cases of uncertainty concerning ritual purity, that if the uncertainty with regard to one's entry into a certain place, he is deemed pure. Okay? It's non, for we learned the Mishnah in Taharot 6:5. הנכנס לבקעה וימותק שם בטומאה בסדר לא ינס ויום הלך למלך המלאוז ואין יודע אם נכנסתי לאותה שדה אם לא נכנסתי. רבי אליעזר אומר ספק ביאתו ספק מגע תאמן. With regard to one who enters into a valley during the rainy season, meaning winter, when people generally do not enter this area, and there was a ritual impurity in such and such a field, and he said, I know I walked to that place, meaning I walked in the valley, but I do not know whether I entered the field where the ritual impurity was or whether I did not enter. Rabbi Eliezer says in the case of uncertainty with regard to entry, meaning it is uncertain whether he entered the area where the ritual impurity is located, he is ritually pure. But if he certainly entered the area where the ritual impurity is located, and the uncertainty pertains to contact with the source of ritual impurity, he is ritually impure. Apparently, the ruling of Shmuel that in a case where it is uncertain whether Gentile thieves entered the house at all, the wine is permitted. The wine is permitted is in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Eliezer. Lo shani hasn't came they can debate the shuman wine and how they subject sveka. How is sveka? The Gemara rejects this. No, it is different there with regard to the wine barrels, since there are thieves who open barrels for the sake of perhaps finding money in them, and they are not interested in the wine. It is a case of compound uncertainty, as is uncertain whether the thieves were non-Yehudim or Yehudim, and even if they were non-Yehudim, it is uncertain whether or not they touched the wine in the case of compound uncertainty, everyone agrees that the wine is not forbidden. And now, turning to 7b, and continuing after the break. Continuing on 70b, Avodah Zarah 70b, top of the page with the words Hahi Revita D'Ishtekach. Top of the page. Hahi Revita D'Ishtekach Tehave Bedi Dane. Adi Lo Bibiade Amrava Chamna Shari Emar Migaba Dechavite Shakalte. Biaval Gavdele Katu Amar Itrome Itrami La. The Gemara relates there was an incident involving a certain non-Yehudi girl who was found among wine barrels, and she was holding wine froth in her hand. Rava said the wine is permitted, as it is reasonable to say that she took it from the outside of the barrel and not from the inside. And even if there is no more of the froth on the outside of the barrel, it is reasonable to say that she happened upon the froth while it was still there, even though it is no longer there. Hahu pul Musa, hisa leklinarda, pesachu chavia tatuva, kia Zarah dimiyama. Avodah v'kamed Rabbi Eliezer Rabbi Elozo Ushra v'lo yadana im mishum desavala ki Rabbi Eliezer de'amar sefek b'yatoel im mishum desaval ruba de'azli b'hade pol Musa Israel ninu. The Gemara relates there was an incident involving a certain army that entered Narda and opened many barrels of wine. When Rav Dimi came from Eretz Yisrael to Babylonia, he said, there was a similar incident that was brought before Rabbi Elazar, and he deemed the wine permitted. But I do not know whether he permitted it, because he holds in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Eliezer, who says concerning uncertainty with regard to entry, the person or item is ritually pure, or whether he permitted it, because he maintains that most of those who went with that army were Yehudim, meaning that although it was a non-Yehudi army, the ancillaries were mostly Yehudim. Yachi, 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 yay, die. I Suffolk, yeah, Suffolk Mago, I Suffolk, yeah, Suffolk Mago. Keva, Neme Patrito, Vaima, did never mind about Go, Michi Suffolk, Miadami. The Gemara asks, if that is so, if he holds it in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Eliezer, why did he permit the wine? Is this a case of uncertainty with regard to entry? It is clear that the ancillaries came and opened the barrel, so it is a case of uncertainty with regard to contact, whether they touch the wine or not, and Rabbi Eliezer agrees that such a case is treated stringently. The Gemara answers, since they opened many barrels, it's reasonable to say that they opened the barrels only with the intention of finding money and had no interest in the wine itself. And therefore, it is similar to a case of uncertainty with regard to entry. Ahu misovita dimas kolea klida maftecha. It's in parentheses. Legoya. Amar Rabbi Yitzchak Amar Rabbi Elazar Avodah Havi B'Midrasha B'Yameinu Lo Masra La Era Shmirat Maftecha Levad. The Gemara relates there was a certain incident involving a certain female owner of a wine shop who transferred the key to the door of her wine shop to a non-Yehudi woman. Rabbi Yitzchak said that Rabbi Elazar said there was a similar incident that was brought before the sages in the study hall, and they said she transferred to her the responsibility for safeguarding the key alone, but did not authorize her to enter the tavern, so there is no concern that she she entered there. Amar Abaye, Afanana mitanina. Hamois emavtechois la'am ha'aretz. Ta'ois of Toyos. Lefi she'lo masalo el hashpirat. Bofteach bilavad. Hashta tahorotav tahorot. Yenesach mimaye. Abaye said we learn this halacha in the Mishnah as well, until Rot 7:1. In the case of one who transferred keys to the one who was unreliable with regard to ritual impurity, even though contact with Am Ha'aretz renders pure items impure, his pure items are pure because he transferred to the Am Ha'aretz the responsibility for safeguarding the key alone and did not authorize him to enter. Now that the Mishnah was determined that his pure items are pure, it is necessary to state that this principle, with regard to the halachot of wine used for libation, Amarav Torotav Tamilot. The guy in Roy, I say, Yaines, and Amma, after us. The Gemara asks with regard to wise reasoning, is this to say that the halachot of ritually pure items are more stringent than those concerning wine for libation? The answer is indeed, that is so. As it was stated that there was a dispute with regard to a courtyard whose owners divided among themselves a low partition. Rav says if one neighbor on the other side of the partition is an Am-Haaretz, one's pure items that he leaves in the courtyard are rendered impure. But in the case of a non-Yehudi neighbor, this does not render his wine an idolatrous libation. And Rabbi Yochanan says his pure items remain pure as well. Evidently, Rav considers the halachot of purity more stringent than those of wine used for a libation. Meisvei, happening Am-Haaretz. שם פירוס ומניח שם כלים ואף המשיידו של עם הארץ מגעס שם קשה לרב. The Gemara raises an objection to the opinion of Rav from Braita. If the inner courtyard belongs to a chaver, meaning one who is devoted to the meticulous observance of mitzvot, especially the halachot of ritual purity, truma, and tithes, and the outer courtyard to an Am-Haaretz that the chaver may lay out his produce there in the inner courtyard and place his vessels there without concern that the Am-Haaretz will touch them and render them impure. And this applies even if the hand of the Am-Haaretz can reach there. This poses a difficulty to the opinion of Rav, who holds that even in a situation where there is a partition, there is concern about contact with an Am-Haaretz. Okay. Amar lecha Rav shani hasam shenitpas alav b'keganav. The Gemara answers that Rav could have said to you, it is different there. As were the Am-Haaretz who tamper with the produce, he could be caught and accused as a thief, and as he has no business being in the inner courtyard, therefore there is no concern that he will tamper with it. Tashima, ומניח שם כלים, ובלבד שלא ידו של Am-Haaretz מגעס לשם, קשיא לרבי יוחנן. The Gemara suggests coming here as support for Rav's opinion from a Braita to Sefton Tahorot 9:11. Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel says if the roof of a chaver is above the roof of his neighbor who is an Am-Haaretz, and that chaver may lay out produce there and place vessels there, provided that the hand of the Am-Haaretz cannot reach there. But if it is within reach, the pure items of the chaver are rendered impure. This poses a difficulty to the opinion of Rabbi Yochanan, who deems permitted pure items in a courtyard divided by a low partition. Amar Rabbi Yochanan shani hasam dis leili ishmotei. The Gemara answers that Rabbi Yochanan could have said to you, it is different there, as were the Amharites to be discovered reaching up to the upper roof, he has a way to excuse his behavior by saying, I merely stretched myself. I was not intending to tamper with anything. Tashima, come in here. That which is taught in Braita. Gago shel chaver, mitzad gago shel Amharitz. Oy zicha v'shotech sham peros. ומניח שם כלים, אף על פי שידו של עם הארץ מגעת לשם, כאשר רב. אמר לך רב, לאו איכה רבי שמעון בן גמליאל דקאי קבעתי, אינה אמר, אמרי כרבי שמעון בן גמליאל. Come in here, that which is taught us in Braita. If the roof of a cover is beside the roof of an aretz, that cover may lay out produce there and place vessels there, even if the hand of the Amharites can reach there. This poses a difficulty to the statement of Rav. The Gemara answers that Rav could have said to you, isn't there the opinion of Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel, which stands in accordance with my opinion with regard to roofs that are next to one another? What I say is in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel. Okay, that's it. That's the whole thing. Now the Mishnah. בולשת שנכנסה לעיר, בשעה שלא חביות פסוחס אסורס, סתומס מותרס. בשעת מלחמה, אלו ואלו מותרס, לפי שאין פנאי לנעשך. The Mishnah says, in the case of a military unit that enters a city, if it entered during peacetime, then after the soldiers leave, the open barrels of wine are forbidden. But if the sealed barrels are permitted. If the unit entered in wartime, both these barrels and those barrels are permitted, because in wartime there is no time to pour wine for libations, as one can be certain that the soldiers did not do so.